So welcome everybody to another Meet the Author. I'm Tamara Parris from Safeopedia, and it's really great that we're able to bring this community program to everybody. I'm going to hand it right over to our host, Gary. But before I do that, I do want to share that we're also at Safeopedia doing workshops now. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat for people to check out if they want. Gary, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tamara. Morning, everyone. I think we've got a really interesting show today. It's with Jeff Dalto, and I do want to just do a quick shout out that we have Jeff's parents on as well, listening on. So, Jeff, you got to be on the show today. Hi, Mom and Dad. Okay, there you go.
Mom and Dad, we love you. Thank you for everything you did.
All right. So let me do it first of all by starting off with a bit of a disclosure. Rosa and I are both contributors into the guide, and the book I'm talking about is the one that Jeff authored. It's called A Guide to Practicing New Safety. So let me start off right into it and say, Jeff, why did you decide to write this new safety guide?
Well, let me say hi to everybody out there. Hi to everybody who had me on. I appreciate it. And I did this for a couple of reasons. The first was I had been creating a whole bunch of stuff on my own, and this idea of being an editor instead of an author was pretty attractive because I was kind of just out of ideas at the moment. But I also felt there's a lot of interest in new safety, and sometimes some of the approaches, some of the things that are available to learn from are pretty hard to read, or maybe not completely accessible. I wanted something that was a little bit easier to read, something that might be the title mentions something like how to what is the title, Gary, again? This is your point, actually.
A Guide to Practicing New Safety.
Yeah, so little intro tips to start practicing and how to begin. I didn't. There's probably other great resources out there that can help you begin practicing what we're going to be calling new safety, and we'll talk about that term. But I thought that would be a nice thing to provide to people. I get questions about that, and I knew that there's just one of the things I think is really exciting about this community is there's this community of practice and people who are willing to learn together. And I had some simple questions over time, and I thought other people would have the same questions. So I just thought I'd try to tap into it, and I thought it went over, better than I expected, better than I hoped.
Great. I think you want to maybe say a few words about a person that was really instrumental in helping you connect, and that's Jeff Lith. Unfortunately, Jeff was going to join us today, but he had a conflict, so he couldn't. But Jeff, you want to just talk about Jeff?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we missed Jeff Lith, and we're sorry he's not here today. He was a last minute scratch. But I've known Jeff for years, just through social media. It's one of those things where one of us reached out to the other years ago, which is my introduction to all this new safety differently hop thing is LinkedIn. Probably goes back to Ron Gant and Dave Collins. And but Jeff was one of the guys who maybe reached out to me, if I recall, pretty early, and we've continued to reach out to one another over years. As I mentioned to you, Gary, despite the fact neither Jeff nor I will ever make a dollar for each other, and we keep helping each other. We've done this for years. And around January, if I recall, I shot off an email to him, and I told him what I was thinking about doing, and he encouraged me, and said, yeah, you should do that. And then I sent my 4 questions, which the guide is 4 questions I ask all these different contributors. And he encouraged me with the questions. And then I said, I need help trying to figure out who to get to contribute. So he helped me with the contributor list. And then some of the contributors are people I know, but others were not people I knew. And so then I said, Jeff, could I CC you on the email to these people to try to get in the door? And so he did that. And then he just kept encouraging me the whole way through. And I think it's typical of Jeff Lith and the support he provides to people in the community. And I think it's to a degree typical of the community as well. So hats off to Jeff Lith. We miss him. And look forward to talking to him again soon. Okay. Check out his website, by the way, at safetydifferently.com.
And if I could just pipe here, when I'm looking at the table of contents, it's really great that I'm also seeing some people that we have in the room here also, like Tanya, I'm seeing your name in there. So some of the people that you know sitting here were also in this guide.
Yeah, I don't know who all's here today, but I can certainly say Rosa's in the guide, Gary's in the guide, Tanya's in the guide. Um, People I met because of the guide might be in the expanded guide. I see Elisa Lynch there from Ireland. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of people. So again, some of whom I only knew tangentially when I sent this email. Like Gary and Rose and I probably had exchanged a few messages on social media, but that's probably where we maxed out at that point. And others didn't know me at all. Tristan Casey had no idea who I was, but he submitted immediately. So,
Well, right. Okay. So let me just share you my experience when I got asked, and I was actually quite honored and pleased that you sent an invitation to me, Jeff, to contribute. Your questions were very pointed, and the fact that the guide title included practicing. When I was writing my contribution, I tried to offer not the why and the what, but more the how aspects, how to get started, how to take something academic and operationalize it for practitioners. And that's what I kind of wrote towards. I'm curious, Rosa, Tanya, anybody else that was a contributor, what sort of thoughts did you go through when you wrote your piece? Rosa, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. Well, I thought it was really important because of the cultural divide happening between safety 1 and safety 2, that we begin to talk about what we mean by safety differently, which it really isn't that different. It's just because it's always been about people. That's my interpretation. So I think that's really what we were able to do is explain it in a way that hopefully people will read it and say, oh, I can get behind that, rather than get stuck on the name. Right. How about you, Tanya? You're muted, Tanya.
I think Jeff might remember that I was a bit reluctant to participate because I, unlike a lot of people who are contributing to this discussion, I don't have that background. I am not a CRSP. I never claimed to be. I don't have any kind of, accreditation with respect to traditional safety that I have to distance myself from or anything. Like I don't have that pedigree. So I was telling Jeff Dalto, I don't know if I'm really the person you want to be contributing to this, because I don't know where I can fit into this whole picture that you're painting.
I do remember that, Tanya, and I remember Jeff Lith helped encourage you to join in. And one of the things, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, is I think what we're calling new safety is one of the things I like about it is it's multidisciplinary. So I felt you fit in quite well. And of course, as I think everybody knows, I'm also not a safety professional. I'm a learning and development guy. So I was happy to have a non-safety professional join me, Tanya.
And I'm not a safety professional either. So I just picked the question I felt I could answer. I didn't answer all the questions.
I noticed that you're a bit of a rule breaker, but safety too isn't all about rules. So I decided to let you in the guide anyway.
Oh, thank you. I feel so included and I belong.
Yeah, in one hand, I was a contributor, but I was also a very avid and curious reader. And what really struck me was the diversity of thinking. And if it's anything that we require in safety and looking forward towards what we call new safety, is the diverse thinking. So it's not about either or, you're right, I'm wrong. I think we got to get over that. We got to look at this is a both and how can we actually look at both and maybe go to a place that we've never been before together. Well, Jeff, you had an interesting role because you're not an author, but you're a curator. How different did you find this?
Oh, it was, like I said, it was in some sense it was great because it was kind of a break. I do write a lot. I create a lot of content. And there are times when you just kind of run out of things to say and need to sit back. So from my own personal perspective, watching these submissions come in, I think it took me about a month and a half to get all these submissions. So it gave me a ton of time to read what all these interesting people had to say see these questions being addressed from different perspectives, and it allowed me to reflect on it, which of course is a big part of the learning process, is that opportunity to practice and then later reflect. So it was just easier, minus the clerical stuff. And then I schlepped a bunch of work onto a graphic designer named Liliana Marchica, who really was earned her paycheck. I think she's probably supposed to do 3-page, a graphic or a 3-page guide instead of a 120-page book. So thanks to her. But yeah, for me, it was just this amazing opportunity to reflect on all these things coming in over a month and a half, which, it's a luxury, and I'll probably won't really get that kind of opportunity too many times. And I hope it played a little bit of role in introducing other people that, who might have read it, to the authors and the ideas and the recommended books and podcasts as well. So I thought that was one of the values of the curation. But for me, it was a great reflection opportunity.
Have you gotten any feedback from your readers? What kind of feedback have you gotten?
Yeah, especially the first weeks. It was really positive. One of the funniest and most outspoken bits of feedback was from Elisa Lynch, who from Ireland, who I didn't know, and I know she was online. Elisa, could you
She's here.
Share your thoughts?
Yeah, Lisa's here.
When you got it?
She may be, because she put herself on mute and no video, so she may be on.
Maybe working.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it was positive. I guess one thing that I got, maybe you guys can help me because my computer's malfunctioning here, but there are a couple people who
Elisa's on now. Hi, Elisa.
Hi, Lisa's on.
Hey, Elisa, could we be so rude as to ask you to share your experience when you first found this guide and first read it?
Yeah, sorry, I have a dog going mad in the background. Can you give me 1 second?
It's good. It's good.
Oops, what did you do to the dog? I have no clue.
I just closed the door. I just closed the door, so I can still hear him, but hopefully you can.
Okay.
So, sorry, Jeff, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So I know somehow you stumbled across this guide on social media, and I was just kind of curious, what was your take? What were your thoughts when you stumbled across it and found it and started reading it?
I got really excited when I saw it. Because for me, I've been dabbling around with New View for quite a while now, but it's not always accessible. And a lot of it's very kind of like academic, and it's all kind of like concepts. But this I found really useful. Like there's some really good tips in there, and it just made it more usable for me. And then the fact that there were so many people that I already follow and look up to and read their stuff and listen to their podcasts, and then like you're literally all in the same place. I just thought it was unreal. I loved it. So yeah. Cool.
That's great. Yeah. I was trying to make it more, accessible, intro level, practical. Here's a couple things you can do. So I'm glad to hear that.
Okay. Anybody else read the book and want to share your comments about your feedback on the book?
If I could just jump in real fast, we talked about the fact that it's diverse, and I tried to make it diverse, but it's not as diverse as I wish it had been. But in terms of reactions, one of the reactions I want to mention real fast, and hopefully you guys can help me because my other computer is failing me. I'm on LinkedIn trying to find a name. There are 2 guys from Brazil who study and practice safety in Australia. One is named Hugo. Do you guys know who I'm talking about?
Hugo Ribeiro. Yeah, Hugo Ribeiro. Yeah.
Thank you. So he and his buddy, whose name I don't remember at the moment, I apologize, reached out. They were really excited. They first of all, they said, hey, could we translate this into Spanish? And then later, or Brazil would be Portuguese, right? Yeah. Sorry about that. And later they ended up just saying like, hey, can we just ask people these same questions? And I said, yeah, please do. And so hopefully they're in the process of creating their guide. So one thing I just want to point out about that is they're going to create that guide in order to sell it to help people in Brazil who are suffering from COVID. So I would encourage everybody listening to this, skip my guide, go buy their guide and help out some people who are having trouble. So I wish that project a lot of luck.
Yeah, nice comment.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you asked if anybody had any thoughts about the book that was present, and sometimes it takes a while to get your thoughts together. So I wanted to ask the question again because you're here on this at this event for a reason. Maybe you just want to talk about that. Why? What attracted you to come today?
Oh, I was really
I'm
surprised.
talking to the audience. Yeah.
Say, I spoke over you. I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I said I was asking the audience.
Oh, the audience. Yeah, please share, everybody.
Janet?
Janice, go ahead, Janice.
Hi there. I heard about the New View again through Jeff and via Gary as well, out of Vancouver here. And I come from an industry, the mining industry on the front end, mineral exploration, where we don't have safety professionals. You know, when you get into the huge projects and the big corporation, but there are actually many businesses out there that don't have safety professionals. So I'm dealing, you know, trying to support leaders who are actually having to be technical leaders, safety, community relations, all of these things all at once. And it's always intrigued me about, I've interacted and met and learned from many of the contributors in this, but I haven't read it yet. So what I'm trying to do is, you know, is first off, thank you for putting this out there. And I'm curious now, I haven't read it yet, but you know, from the questions I see, about safety professionals. Now, how might this, you know, help me scaffold as well to supporting project leaders that have to deal with it in an integrated way? I'm really curious about that. Yeah.
Janice, what are your daily work responsibilities then? So I could try to answer that a little better.
Sorry, I'm independent, but I have been a project manager, and I've been a technical leader, geologist. There's a whole spectrum in there, but now I'm really trying to help, you know, I'm focused on helping the leaders, the managers.
Well, one of the questions Gary had for me, what are some of the recurrent themes that came up? And one of the most recurrent themes is that this stuff maybe isn't really about safety, and it's about business success. It's about operations, it's about production. Rosa wrote an amazing piece, which was 8 or 12 pages long, and it's all, and her piece is all about human relationships. There's a lot. There are strong underpinnings of Edgar Schein's work on organizational culture in all of these thinkers. There's a lot of Amy Edmondson and psychological safety and the importance of teaming. So I think mostly the guide could help anybody in any field if they're thinking about how they want to relate with coworkers, how they want to make effective teams, and how they want to have better success at work. Rosa or Gary, anybody want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point. We seem to be going through cycles in business. For a while there, safety was just something that happened. It was kind of like a secondary thought because it's all about production. So we go back to the early days of mass production and everything else. But then we went to that phase where other things started raising importance, and we started to create these new titles, like Chief Quality Officer. Then all of a sudden there's a Chief Safety Officer. And all of a sudden we take these ideas and we raise them up and we put somebody in charge of that. And I remember during the quality movement, somebody was made, I am the Chief Quality Officer for this organization. And we all looked at each other going like, oh, is Joe going to be in charge of quality? What do I do now? So it had a bad taste to it. So Janice, in some cases, because you and I have done some stuff in mining together, is I'm okay not having a mining safety sort of chief inspector, whatever you want to call it here. Because I think safety is kind of ingrained and embedded throughout the organization. And I do like the idea of, Jeff, as you and I have talked about, it's really about the business and what are the different aspects of business going on. I mean, we're seeing it now. There's going to be a Chief Digital Transformation Officer. Like, I'm going like, what is going on here?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was what my gut feeling was, is that, there's going to be lots of relevance here. And, isn't that the core thing that, about risk and opportunity, the underpinning of safety. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your transparency, Janice, because even though you didn't read the book, you had a purpose for being here, which I highly applaud. The whole issue of how do we talk with management? How do we get managers involved? It is a huge one, which could probably be another book, Jeff. Experiences in senior management involvement. I'm wondering, Jim Marinas, did you read the book? Or because obviously you don't have to have read it to comment on how do we get managers, how do we help managers, how do we support them in this area? Because I know you do a lot of work with that.
I did read the book, and to answer your first question, the reason I'm here is because I was intrigued. When I saw this effort, my immediate response was to applaud. Thank you, because putting all of that into a relatively small footprint, I mean, look at the breadth of the input that you got, is really a contribution to our business and our industry as a whole. From the perspective of leadership involvement, I agree with what many of the folks said, and I think you summarized also, Jeff, and that's that the conversations are really where you have to start, and having the in is important, because you can't talk to these folks unless you're invited in. So
Good
I
point.
think that the credibility necessary is something that I think our industry needs to work on. And as long as we're talking in divisive ways, our credibility suffers. We've got to have a community of practice that realizes that we all have opinions, but we're all in it for the same reason. And I don't think senior leadership yet sees that clearly. And so, that would be one of the things that I think we need to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
That was great, Jim. Thank you very much.
Right.
Can I jump in here for a sec? Hi, Peter. How are you? I haven't read the book yet either. So I reached out to Tamara just to have a chat with her. So she suggested I join in today. So I find it quite interesting already. So I've got a background in the environmental health and safety for 20 something years. So this management quotient of all this, I can tell you that was to me, it was the most important thing, was getting the management on side. So I think sometimes you have to kind of be like a bull in a china shop at times, because you have to get your point across. And I always found that the two words that kind of got their attention was due diligence and liability. And as soon as you said liability, that equates money, right? So you have somebody gets hurt or somebody does whatever, right? So, when these start seeing the money going out one way as opposed to, coming in a sense. So that was always, I had a lot of chats with, my managers, plant managers, and over time, and even the owners too, right? So, but you have to be diligent about it, because, it can be out of sight, out of mind one day, and the next day it's, nobody cares about it until somebody gets hurt or there's an incident or something, right? So it's a pretty important part, the management part of getting them on side, I think, is one of the key components to like a healthy safety program for sure. And if they buy in, then, it trickles down, right? So I mean, that ends up going to the, however you want to describe it, the supervisors or the department managers or things like that too, right? So that's a pretty important portion of all this, so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Hey, if I could jump in and share something, I don't really know what I'm talking about. We mentioned that Jeff Lith is not here today, and I did talk to him briefly yesterday, and he gave me a quick comment. So I don't know all the context or background, but he said that in the Australian courts of law right now, it's now being seen as a legal advantage to have been using a HOP or safety differently, or safety 2 philosophy or theory as part of your safety program. So admittedly, I don't know anything about that, but that might be something worth Googling, and it speaks to the issue that Peter was just saying about liability.
Yeah.
That's very
Peter raises a good point when you talked about, because the question we all ask is, what's in it for me? And I know that down in Australia, because they have some pretty draconian laws, and they've had to put them in place because maybe the C-suite has been giving lip service and they haven't been paying attention. People are still getting hurt and injured. How do you kind of like grab hold of them and shake them and give them their attention, particularly if their injuries are still taking place? So is it fining? Is it putting people in jail, the solution? I'm not quite sure, but somehow we've got to kind of wake them up and get their attention. I think that's what we're really talking about.
Well, you know, this is interesting because I had a post on LinkedIn where I asked about how do you get managers out on the floor, because the one thing I always hear from employees, there's no management visibility here. How do we know that they actually care? And then when they do start talking about safety, they have no idea what they're talking about because they haven't been out here doing the work or seeing the work, right? So a lot of people said, well, wait a minute, you know, sometimes management engagement is a negative thing because they come out on the floor and they actually damage the morale by the way they're acting. So we have to be careful in this. Yes, we can motivate people by bringing up the liability issue, but then the quality of interaction isn't what we want because they're not out there from a human perspective or a caring perspective. They're out there from a compliance and avoiding going to jail perspective. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm just getting this insight right this moment because, it matters what attitude you have when you go out on the floor to talk to people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Do you think there's creating more confusion when we constantly have new theories and safety this number, safety that number, HOP, etc., that when we come to the executive teams talking like this, they kind of look at us like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I'm from the floor. I'm from the floor. And when I'm hearing all this, like what Jim was saying, it just kind of strikes me as very bizarre conversations, to be quite candid. We don't have marketing and accounting and production and all those other departments coming to you saying, I have a new theory this week. Are you going to buy in? Because no, because you know what? Next month, you're going to bring something different to me. And the following month, it'll be like HOP 5, like whatever, like just do your job. Like I'm on my soapbox getting off. What are other people's thoughts?
But I think you're right, Tamara, that Jim spoke to that well. And I think there is a sense that, or has been a sense, and hopefully it's ending, that safety has been too tribal and too divisive, and that's been non-helpful. I think Jim spoke to that well. I think the guide, the contributors to the guide repeatedly mentioned that actually a lot of this stuff is not new. And that we don't have to see safety 2 as an binary opposition of safety 1, and that they could be complementary. And I think that the tribalism hopefully can end. And I think everyone in the guide said that. And we can see that these are complementary efforts, and hopefully that would help. But I agree with your larger point.
But what I'm trying to bring forward is the perception that we're presenting to other colleagues in the organization about our professionalism. That's my point, is like how we're facing the world as professionals. I see somebody's hand up. Michael, why don't you join in?
Unmute yourself, Michael. You're muted.
Oh, I do apologize for that. I think you're being a bit hard on yourself. I'm not too sure that it's not I don't think it's within, it should be the initiative or the onus should be on safety to make themselves better understood and to be seen as professional. I believe you folks all are, as are quality people. But the modern organization doesn't allow for going on the floor, to be able to appreciate the complexity and variation that's inherent in any kind of production facility or an iron ore facility. We don't have the labor to do that. And as long as people, humans, labor is seen as a cost and not as a sentient being that's capable of identifying problems, commenting on safety issues, as long as we don't have that level of workforce, numbers in the workforce, and we won't be able to do this. We just won't do it, and things will not change.
But
There
don't-
isn't sufficient labor. There isn't sufficient labor to be able to do the things that are required to do to run cost-effective, great quality, great safety, to do all those things, because the paradigm around which we organize ourselves doesn't allow for that.
But it isn't the lack of willing sentient beings that cause that.
No, not at all. It's just there's not enough of them. If I raise my hand and if I see a problem on the floor or out in the field, there's nobody to respond to it. There just isn't the numbers. And I know I raised this before, and there was some consternation or pushback, but at Toyota, they have 4 times more labor in the front line than General Motors. They have 4 times more labor than Ford and Chrysler. They have double the labor per vehicle than Porsche does. They stop the line 3,000 times a week in each plant. Nothing slips by. If it's a safety issue, if it's a quality issue, it doesn't get by. And they're staffed to respond to that emergent issue, much the same way as we have fire departments in every big major city, and we pay firefighters to sleep at night because we don't know when they'll be needed. How many of the organizations that you've worked in have that type of workforce ready, prepared to act on an emergent basis?
Yeah, valid question, Michael, because it's one I raised in electric utilities. We actually have emergency crews on standby 24/7. So if the power goes out, they fix it.
Yeah,
But when you ask the question, so do you have a standby improvement team?
exactly.
We're an improvement team. What's that? No. Well, do you realize the great opportunities that you are missing because you don't have that team ready to respond quickly, and take some action?
And it's not just the opportunities you're missing. When you don't catch those, you're mass producing your mistakes. And when you mass produce your mistakes to then correct them later on, either downstream or on warranty, it's horrifically much more expensive. So the notion of stopping a line multiple hundreds of thousands of times a week and a day to be able to deal with issues, variances, complexity as it emerges, for them, it just makes complete and total sense, because not to do so, and think about it in a hospital as well. If I can't identify a problem that's causing patients to get more sick, like the insertion of a needle, not doing enough swaps, not having enough nurses on duty and on a ward to be able to conduct all of the items that they have to do, in addition to all the emergent issues that will come up on a ward, things get worse, people stay longer, people get sicker, and it becomes more expensive. Hiring 10 more nurses on a ward actually reduces cost.
Well, that certainly goes against lean principles, doesn't it, Michael?
Absolutely. And Toyota says that's what lean came out of Toyota, and Toyota says everyone that does lean is doing it wrong.
Yeah, there's a whole thing on GE taking up lean. Yeah.
Mhm.
But that is another conversation.
Yeah.
What is
I'm
it
also
called?
seeing that Janice
it
is
the,
weighing in.
Uh-huh.
Janice, you got a
Janice?
couple of questions in the chat. Why don't you read?
Yeah, you know what, I'm curious, just from what you were saying, Michael, there is, we talk about safety and, and then we also, are we talking about health in terms of, is that more of a preventative side, or are, in the language alone of talking about safety, are we missing out on that, conveying that opportunity? That's what I was just getting out of what you were saying there. And then my second question is what could this new safety and the various contributions to it evolve into? Like, what would you see it being like 20 years out? It'd be interesting to wildcat that.
Well, we would have to ask Eric Haldnagel about what new safety is going to be 20 years out, but hopefully it'll be a breakdown of some of these silos. Hopefully it'll be further improvement in the human relationships at work and teaming we're talking about. I think it was Michael, if I remember. I just wanted to, I appreciated what you said there, and thank you for that. I think you're right that one point you're making is that our organizations are not cultures or islands in their own, but they're nested in larger cultures, national cultures, global economic cultures, all which is true. And I hear you hear the point you're making. Of course, I assume you're not saying we shouldn't try. Is that true?
Yeah, and I'm cautious about using the word culture. I think it's a mental model, and it was a mental model that was created not by a particular culture in how it's commonly understood in terms of an ethnic background or a location. It has much more to do with need. You know, you're coming out of the Second World War, you have a destroyed economy, and you have to compete against the biggest company in the world. Doing it the traditional way or doing it the same way they were doing it was not going to cut it. Particularly when you had no market, you had no natural resources, you had limitations on everything. So you had required them to make some changes and challenge some of the assumptions that were commonly held. And one was that in a traditional hierarchy, going back to Gary referenced the Industrial Revolution, when you had people coming into industrial concerns at that time, the people that were doing so were moving from rural communities, they were illiterate, they had no formal education. So the organization design was to limit them in terms of their ability or their autonomy to make decisions, to participate in decision-making. They were a set of hands. And then you inculcate thinking and decision-making at the top. And the second design construct was to segregate people based on what they know and have movement up within a silo rather than across the flow. Now, nearly every organization that you folks work in today is designed along those lines. Toyota has changed that. And that was a recognition in the 1950s that our people are smart, they're educated, they understand complexity and variation at the point at the workforce, on the floor, to a degree that no one above them will. And if we don't involve them and engage them, and it's also a recognition of the second law of thermodynamics, right? We're moving from states of order to disorder. That's always going to happen. That's nonstop. So any kind of change initiative is ridiculous. It's happening anyway. So it's a recognition that because things are constantly changing, we need to put a control on that, which in the case of Toyota's people, and we have to identify what those changes are, good, bad, or indifferent, and we have to respond and react to those changes. To do that requires a sensory network at the front level who can engage in that. I'm sorry, I'm talking way too much here.
No, you're fantastic. You should talk more. But isn't that part of the reason why lean sometimes, as you said, Toyota is saying people are doing lean wrong. People have tried to take that as a portable toolkit and apply it at their organization, but they're not changing their culture. They don't have those fundamental understandings that you're talking about that Toyota had, and really those, and Shine would talk about the underlying assumptions or you might be referred to a mental model that way, my heuristics, my way of seeing the world, and that's what's kind of missing. So when you apply total quality management or you apply lean and try to just pop it in your organization, all those deep unstated undercurrents are fighting against it, right?
Well, I liken it to Russell Askoff would say in terms of systems. He says you can take a car apart, the best car in the world, and you can take it apart, and it no longer is a car. Even though all the parts are located in the room, it's lost all function. It's lost its nature of being a car. And I think that's what happened when people went to Toyota and they looked at lean. They looked at a part of their company and said, let's do that, or let's do quality, or let's do safety. Deming, as a matter of fact, Tanya, you just mentioned Deming here. Deming was a huge influence on the folks. So the culture is really not one that's Asian or Japanese, but it was so much informed by Ford, by Deming, by Americans, and they just did whatever they needed to do to get by in the 50s. So I think that seems to be the problem. We look at the one thing that becomes obvious, and what we don't see are all of the interactions that take place inside and outside of those domains, those areas that enable them to do it.
My frustration is that we talk about this at an academic, at the head, but we never get down below that to how the heck do we get people, the people with the power to buy into adopting the central beliefs and assumptions that need to be in place in order for this to all work, which goes to my point earlier that managers can go walk the floor, but that doesn't mean that they're interacting in the way that they need to interact. And I see Eliza kind of nodding her head. What are you thinking?
I suppose I'm thinking of a few points that were made earlier, first by Tamara and then by Janice. I definitely identify with Tamara saying, like, because I've done it. I've sat in the boardroom and go, I want to do safety differently. And they're like, what the fuck does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know, let's do it. And they're just like, yeah, there's no credibility there. And I can't even verbalize what it is that I want to do. Sorry, I just realized I swore. Anyway, so, and then to Janice's point, you wrote there in the chat of like, what could New View Safety or HOP evolve into? And it's like, well, what actually will other people be saying about it in 20 years? Could they be going, oh yeah, that HOP New View thing, that's gone now, we're moving on to something else. And they were so, like, the way we, like, a lot of people now go, oh, traditional safety, that's crap, just move on to the New View. People could be saying that about what we're doing right now in another 20 years. So I don't know what it's going to evolve into, but, and back to Tamara's point, there is definitely a level of, I suppose, professionalism and cohesiveness that needs to be across the whole thing, because at the moment, yeah, we do look scattered, and it's great to get excited about all the new stuff, but there's lots of great stuff in traditional safety as well. So that's, sorry, I've gone off on a...
I'd like to go back to that point that Peter made. We seem to be entangled a lot with other paradigms. And honestly, when you talk to the C-suite, particularly the CFO, the paradigm that is so strong is the finance one. It's the monetary side of things. And for us as safety folks to go there and start talking our paradigms, this CFO has taken that, translating it through their Rolodex and mind, saying, what does this mean in terms of dollars? Where's the ROI, ROA, and all that language? And so it becomes a dilemma for me. I've experienced it. So if I'm up here, they're down here, is it up to me to raise them up, or is it up to me to come down here, connect with them, talk shop with them? That allows me to connect and then bring them up there together. And I've done both, but I think I have more success getting down to their level, finding out where they are. So I'm really trying to say is that we got to meet the customer or the person we're talking to at the level that they're at, first of all. Then once you kind of like build that relationship, Rosa, with them and bond, then it's an easier to kind of bring them up, but you do that together, not independently.
You have to find out where they are, like, like their mindset and everything else. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in three different industries. I worked for Magna at one time. So go back to, I guess, Michael's kind of bailiwick there a bit, but then I went to Goodyear. They made tires, and then the next one, the oil and gas. So they all look at things differently, and the industries themselves are completely different too. It's more, the tire was more physical. So, the machinery and everything you look at, and, the ergonomics that go along with everything else, it's a completely different, as opposed to if you're in the oil and gas, or in at the car plant or something like that. They're putting on parts or something like that, you know, so the scenarios are all different, but you still need, well, my experience, you still need to, you still need to find out what the man is thinking and, what his thought process is and, what his views are, right? And then that's where you have to kind of start from, right? So for me, but, like I thought it was, but I mean, you gotta keep, it's a never ending job because, you gotta keep at them, right? Because, they're worried about quality or they're whatever it is, or production or, who knows? But, it's just something where I made a point of like having regular contact every day to go in to talk to them instead of, unless something happened or whatever, like you kind of need to, I guess I hate to use it this way, but you have to kind of need to be in their face regularly. So, but,
Yeah, these are very strong paradigms. I mean, I'm sure that all company vision statements have say, our employees are our number one asset. And you go, okay, fine. So show me where they show up on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
Are they on the revenue side, or are they on the liability side, or are they on the expense side? Why don't we go and change that? Oh, you can't change it. Those are laws, right? Those are rules.
Yeah.
So these people are also constrained by their little paradigms as well. So Peter, I believe you're quite correct. We've got to help them escape their paradigms as well.
Yeah. They like they can't help themselves, right? Because they're there to do a job is to get product out or get, it's just probably one little thing that they don't realize, but I mean, in a sense, but it can be very costly, right? So,
yeah.
So I guess, I used to say to these guys all the time, says my job here is to make sure you go home safely every day.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like my mantra, right? It's like, so they understand that, like you're, we got things to do here and you need to think about this properly. And, so I found that the last little while still working, that we spent a lot of time going down and training the managers and the supervisors, and that's where it helped going, cascade down from the top and all the way down, right? So I mean, you spend as much time on the managers as supervisors with, we were talking about this before, how they interact with people. Well, if you give them the proper training or, like the training that they need, you'd like to think that kind of rubs off on them, right? And that's how they interact with people on the floor.
Yeah, right. Tanya, does your hand go up?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the reference, but I was on a conference recently where a company had talked about, and they're in the power distribution service. They had talked about, this new view stuff, but not just as safety. So they unveiled it to their entire organization. So we're talking HR, we're talking finance, we're talking procurement, we're talking production and all the normal stuff. So what they did was, I don't remember forgive me, I don't have the details on their program and the details might be important. But what I remember is that they had a core team of people, interdisciplinary, who were trained in the hot philosophy kind of thing. They had cards that they put on everybody's lanyards kind of thing. And they didn't treat it as safety as much as just the way we do our jobs. And so, I mean, if there was a mistake that happened in HR, which happens all the time, right? People are people and people make mistakes, and we have to just recognize this as just part of the human condition. And so it doesn't really matter what job you're in, you're liable to make a mistake. And if I don't care, we often classify things on severity, but the mistakes can happen in all sorts of things. And if we can bring this stuff to anywhere, so we're talking finance and HR and, and janitorial services and all the rest of this, they'll see the benefits of this stuff no matter what they're doing. And this company was early on their journey, but they have been doing it for about 18 months or something. And they were seeing the payoffs because people were starting to use different language in their meetings. They were starting to see different reactions when things were going off kilter. And they started to see people collaborating across the industry, across their company, because they started to recognize, oh, I can help you with what I'm doing. Okay, so this was starting to become a much stronger concept once you took the safety out of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to go back to kind of where we started, a lot of the contributors to this guide said this is not about safety. So maybe if you're trying to advance it in your organization, you shouldn't advance it in the safety department, or maybe you shouldn't use the word safety. And Eliza talked about like she went into a meeting and she was like, I want to do safety differently, and everyone's like, well, James McPherson kind of said the same thing in a guide. Like Ron Gant, by contrast, now says I don't even use these words when I'm going to a company, right? And so maybe we shouldn't be using all the jargon that comes with our little bags, and maybe we shouldn't even be trying to introduce this to safety. And Tanya's point is right, that half the contributors made the point that Tanya just made correctly.
But that speaks to changing the system, the entire system, and questioning all of the assumptions we have about how we organize ourselves and how we bring people together to get work done, regardless of what that is, what that endeavor is.
Yeah.
And there's a huge reluctance to do that. Beliefs run deep. Try talking someone out of their religious beliefs. Any belief that they may have. Look what's going on in the United States. It doesn't come easy. And if a finance person is responsible for holding to the conventions that are outlined in general accounting practices, that's what they will do. And if that means we can't put a price on the value of the safety initiative, but I can measure the fact that if you stop the line, we're going to have fewer things rolling off at the end of the day. I can't approve that. And that belief runs incredibly deep and strong.
So Jeff, I'm hearing the spark of your next book. It won't be safety, but it's really, what is it that we have to change? And maybe it is, as Michael says, from the system point of view, not just safety, but it's finance, it's manufacturing, you name it, it's all there. So instead of the 4 questions, and I thank you for asking those 4 questions, we need to think about what are the next 4 questions that we want to ask, and how can we actually create these pathways for these newer voices to talk a bit about where we're going to go to. I'm just recognizing time. We've got 5 minutes left. So if anybody got some more comments, just please share them right now.
I just
Anyone out there?
wanted to share one pattern that I'm seeing, and whether it's relevant for this. Is a lot of organizations, as we're trying to move towards, green economies and things like that, many businesses that's front of mind as well, as part of the people, planet, profit scenario. And it's also driven by the finance community and the investors. So there are all of these standards that are actually coming almost like an avalanche. They've already been there. ESGs, environmental social governance. And you notice there's no safety in there anymore, right? So it's something that's becoming more front of mind, and that's what I'm seeing in organizations. They're starting to see safety as kind of like, oh, well, we've done that. But yet they're very much tied together in terms of a risk perspective and decision-making perspective. So I'm just, what I've been learning and exploring through New View Safety is their universality that can keep that relevant and front of mind in helping to support decisions in the world of work, and working together on all of those fronts. So if you can leverage ahead of that, otherwise this could all get left behind potentially. So, maybe that influences the organizing of them together as well. Just a thought, that a pattern that I've been seeing.
The funny thing is, I have no background in safety whatsoever, and I think sometimes that is the issue, is that this conversation is looking at how does safety change and how do we have to deal with or evolve safety, and we're talking from safety practitioners' perspective. This whole conversation should be about frontline. This should be about how are we going to enable the front line? How do we create conditions that allow the people who are exposed to the greatest danger to tell us when that danger is imminent, to tell us what improvements have to be made. And it's not about psychology. It's giving them the tools and the structure and the mechanisms to be able to tell us, we need to do something here. And what we do instead is we say, we recognize this is an issue, so let's ship this off and we'll make this in Bangladesh where we can kill people.
Okay. So I'm going to leave the last 2 minutes for this conversation. It's coming to the top of our. I always like to end with asking the author 3 takeaways, Jeff. What would you like to leave with the audience? Your 3 takeaways.
Well, I just want to thank everybody here, first of all, for listening in, and all the contributors, of course, and Safepedia, and my own workplace, Vector Solutions, who let me spend all that time making this guide. The 3 takeaways I thought were one, that we shouldn't be divisive, and there were times I kind of wanted the title of the guide back, so it didn't say new safety and therefore suggest an old safety and suggest that new safety is better. The other thing is that there's no like checklist approach for implementing this, but I thought the guide and the contributors offered some good principles to get started on it. And lastly, maybe if I can add 4 things, you know, I think it's a multidisciplinary approach, and I think it's Michael. I can only see your name when you're speaking. I think you're right. We have to put obviously the needs of the workers first, and understand their expertise and knowledge.
Great. Okay. Well, it's 9 o'clock, so I think we're at the top of our. So thank you, everybody, for joining us again for another lightning session I think we had today. So Tamara, over to you to close it off.
Yeah, no, it is that time again. So thank you, everybody, for choosing to spend this hour with us. It was a great conversation. Thank you, Jeff, for carving out time to join us and share your guide and create such great conversation. It was wonderful. We hope that you come back. Did you have any last thoughts before we go?
Well, I forgot to thank my mom and dad for listening in. They've been texting, so thanks to them. Thanks to everybody else. I guess the other thing, I am an L&D professional, and I'm not a safety professional. So the reason I find this interesting is I feel like it's about learning and organizational learning. So I do want to trumpet my own special interests here.
Right.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right.